Welcome everyone to a video that does not involve me discussing something I think is overrated. You know, with the videos on The Boys and the Snyder Cut and Rotten Tomatoes, I felt like this channel could use some positivity. So today I am discussing my favorite movies from each individual year that I've been alive. This is part 1 and will involve the years 2000 to 2010. The rules are that I can pick one movie from each year, except for 5 individual years I've allowed myself to pick multiple films because some of these years they were huge for movies for me and I had to talk about just more than one. I also will not be discussing the year 2021 because so far this year I've only seen 3 movies and I haven't liked a single one of them, unfortunately. They have been The Snyder Cut, a movie called The Little Things, and Willy's Wonderland, featuring Nicolas Cage. We're just going to act like this year hasn't existed so far. And with that, let's start with the turn of the century, which just so happens to be the year I was born, the year 2000. My favorite movie from the year 2000 is X-Men. This was a very solid first entry to this series, and it paved the way for comic book movies to come. The cast is phenomenal, and they did a great job of balancing a huge array of characters like Storm, Jean Grey, Logan, Rogue, Cyclops, Magneto, and Professor X. And I like that we get to see all these characters interacting in different ways, especially Logan and Rogue. They really focus in on these two characters because they're kind of the lost sheep finding their way, and I think they do a great job with this. And I also like the whole plot of Magneto and all the tension between the mutants and the humans. It's very smart and has a lot of social commentary, and it's a really fun movie to watch. My favorite movie from the year 2001 is none other than Shrek. What else do I need to say? Has there ever been a movie with more cultural impact than Shrek? Has there ever been a movie that has stood the test of time like Shrek has? This movie is super quotable, super memeable. It's funny, it's heartfelt, and it's everything you could want from an animated movie. It's funny for adults, it's funny for kids. And now I admit, I was late to the game with this movie. I didn't watch it until I was actually 17 years old. But yet, even with my age, I loved this movie and it almost made me cry. I'm not exaggerating. The Hallelujah scene where Shrek and Fiona go their different ways nearly brought me to tears. So yeah, it balances the emotion with the humor so well. It's smart, it's witty, it's funny, even for adults. So props to Shrek for being my favorite movie, and everyone's favorite movie, from the year 2001. 2002, my favorite movie, Spider-Man. After watching the entire trilogy on rotation 774 times, I think I can say this is definitively my favorite Spider-Man movie I've ever seen. They do a great job telling the story, they lay the groundwork for the next 2, and it's so beautiful. There's a lot of emotion, but there's also a lot of action. The CGI holds up pretty well. All of the characters are great. I love that we get slow moments of sorrow and trial in Peter's life, like the scene where he's dealing with Uncle Ben's death. In person, he sees Uncle Ben die, and he has to struggle with that. I love that we also get to see him after his graduation, grappling with the fact that Uncle Ben was not there, and Aunt May comes in, and there's a really sweet moment there. And I also love, and this is, I think, a really underrated moment in the movie, when Peter is talking to MJ while Aunt May is in the hospital, and he's basically expressing his feelings for MJ through the idea that Spider-Man has all these feelings because MJ doesn't know. It's such a sweet moment. The dialogue is so incredible, so rich. And yet, it's not just these slow moments that make the film great. There's a lot of great action between Spidey and the Green Goblin. Willem Dafoe is awesome as this character, even though the Green Goblin's not a very relatable superhero villain. Even though, I mean, he does lose his business, but he just kind of goes berserk. He's not a super relatable character. You still love him because his performance is so gripping. And all the characters are great, the action is great, the CGI still holds up pretty well, even though it's a bit dated. I mean, it did come out in 2002. But CGI is good, characters are great, story is great, the finale is awesome, and it's only topped by the finale in Spider-Man 2. And one more thing, the music. Wow. Props to Danny Elfman. Absolutely incredible score. He knocked it out of the park with this one and in Spider-Man 2. But out of the whole trilogy, I would say Spider-Man, the first one, has the second best soundtrack. And I'll get into the next one, which is the best in my opinion, later. But yeah, Spider-Man, don't sleep on it anymore. Rewatch it and relive its glory. My favorite movie from 2003 is Elf. I'm not a huge comedy movie fan, but I absolutely love Elf. It makes me laugh every single time I watch it. We see it just about every year for Christmas time. It gets you in the right mood. It makes you laugh, warms your heart seeing Buddy and his relationship with his dad. And it really never gets old for me. The more I watch it, the more I appreciate it. The more I notice the funny little interactions between random characters like the guy that runs that store in the mall. 6-inch ribbon strips. And codename Santa's got a brand new bag. Just incredible dialogue, really funny, heartwarming, and it is definitely my favorite Christmas movie. Getting into the year 2004, this was a year that I couldn't just pick one movie. There were so many good ones I had to pick a few, and I have 4 for the year 2004, so it works out perfectly. And my first pick is Spider-Man 2. This was such an incredible follow-up to Spider-Man 1. Right off the bat, you understand where this movie is going. Peter's life is in shambles. He's trying to deliver pizza. He can't do it. He's trying to go to class, but he can't make it because he's so busy being Spider-Man. And they introduce the conflict so well. And it's a really interesting theme that they deal with. Whether you should follow your dreams or do what you think is right. Sometimes they don't always line up. And that's not a very popular theme in movies at all. The whole scene where Aunt May is like, sometimes to do what's right, we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most, even our dreams. What an incredible, powerful quote. There's a lot of great dialogue like that in the movie. The action is great. The CGI is really outstanding in this movie. It looks new. And I think it won an Oscar for visual effects and totally deserved it. So yeah, Spider-Man 2 deserves all the hype it gets. Alfred Molina is great as Doc Ock. And that's my first pick for 2004. My second pick for the year 2004 is The Incredibles. I often go back and forth between which Pixar movie is the best, and I go back and forth between one of the 3 first Toy Story movies and The Incredibles. But, they're all great, and The Incredibles is so smart. There's a lot of social commentary in this movie, a lot of political ideas discussed about what's the role of superheroes in society if we have them. And I love the quote of, when everyone's super, no one is. It's such an interesting idea. It's very philosophical and yet still great for kids to watch. Super fun, fast-paced, exciting, great action scenes, and just an incredible movie. My third pick for the year 2004 is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This one took Harry Potter to new heights. It has the most distinct look and feel, maybe besides Half-Blood Prince. It has such a great mystery, one of the most engaging because it's so personal to Harry. The whole mystery with Sirius Black, and I love how they tie Lupin into it, and those 2 characters are actually my favorite in the whole series. So I love those characters. I love the mystery that's unfolded. I love the score. I love the cinematography. And I also just love the whole third act, the time traveling bit. So fun to watch, super awesome, and that's my thoughts on that. My final pick for the year 2004 is the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. I grew up watching SpongeBob. I constantly quoted it. You can ask my friends. I probably bugged them how much I quoted SpongeBob. And I love the early seasons, and this movie perfectly captured the feel and the humor of those early seasons. It's super hilarious, super funny, super quotable, super memeable, and has a great message for kids, Don't underestimate yourself because you're young. What a good message for kids to hear. What a funny movie. And what a final entry to my picks of 2004. Moving on to 2005, my favorite movie is Batman Begins. I want to give a quick shout out to Revenge of the Sith. I really love that movie too, but Batman Begins is just better. I'm sorry to all the Revenge of the Sith fans out there, but I still love that movie. Batman Begins is the perfect origin story. Probably the best origin story we've seen in a superhero movie. Bruce maturing throughout the film, at first seeking revenge on his parents' death and that guy that killed him. and then maturing into the hero that not only doesn't seek revenge anymore, but also opposes people who have extreme methods of justice like Ra's al Ghul is really cool. And I love how they intertwine that with Scarecrow. Batman is not just facing one battle here. He's fighting for Gotham and showing that it is savable, but he's also fighting fear. He fights his own fears. He overcomes his fears. And he also defeats Ra's and Scarecrow. The villains are perfectly balanced. The dialogue in this movie is just phenomenal. I mean, such powerful quotes delivered by brilliant actors. They had a wonderful cast in this movie. And Batman Begins, such a great movie. It still looks great, even though it came out, 16 years ago? Wow, that's a long time, and yet still holds up to this day. Now, with 2006, we're going to continue our exploration into Christopher Nolan. The Prestige. What a brilliant film. What a brilliant cast. Brilliant story. I can't say enough about this film. It may be my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. And it's definitely not the last one on this list, so just brace yourself for that. Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Scarlett Johansson all do a brilliant job of portraying their characters in this film. I love the plot of two overly obsessed magicians trying to outdo each other. I love the whole scene where we get like a montage of them messing up each other's acts. It's so interesting to watch, so entertaining. The dialogue's great, just like every Christopher Nolan movie, except for like Dunkirk maybe. But yeah, The Prestige, very, very awesome movie. I love the twists that we see at the end, the big reveals. Wow. Enough said. Wow. Now my pick for 2007 is probably going to get some hate, some disagreements, but it is a pick that I feel is very underrated, and that is Spider-Man 3. I've already talked about the score in another video on this channel, and yeah, I really believe that this has one of the best scores of all time. I think it's the best of the trilogy, and it would literally be in my top 3, if not my number 1, best movie soundtrack of all time. It's beautiful. And this movie gets a lot of hate. You know, I understand it. I understand that it's very convoluted. Some of the writing is sloppy. It's weird. It's awkward. But I think the good parts really outshine the bad if you watch it enough times like I have. But, you know, I'm biased. I'm a Tobey Maguire stan, I guess. But, I mean, I love Sandman. I love Peter dealing with his desire for revenge. I love that he goes into a dark side after learning that Sandman, his uncle's killer, is still out there and on the loose. I like that he distances himself from Harry and MJ and hurts people even. You know, there's consequences to his actions. And he has to redeem himself. And Harry has to redeem himself. And I think all those elements work very well. Topher Grace's Venom, yeah, not very good. But I think the real villain is Peter and his struggle with the symbiote. The finale in this movie is done really, really well. The CGI, you know, is a little bit lacking, but Harry redeems himself, sacrifices himself in the end, and the whole finale, all the action that goes on, not just in the finale, but in the whole movie, is still done really well. It's intense, it's very exciting, and very entertaining. So yeah, Spider-Man 3, not great. There's definitely a lot of convoluted stuff, but it's still got a lot of good parts on it, and for me, the good parts outshine the bad parts. And one scene from the movie that I just think is really great, a lot of people don't realize, is Flint Marko confessing his sins to Peter, you know, telling him, I did kill your uncle, but here's what really happened. It's such a tragic moment, but also an uplifting moment as they find forgiveness. And yeah, Spider-Man 3 gets a little bit too much hate in my opinion, and I really love it. My favorite movie from the year 2008 is The Dark Knight. This is a film that I think deserves every bit of high praise that it gets. The Joker is obviously fantastic, and Heath Ledger's performance will go down as one of the best performances in cinema history. But there are other parts of the story that I love that I think get overlooked a little bit. I love Commissioner Gordon in this movie. He becomes an integral part of the plot, faking his own death to save people, coming back, stopping the Joker, and then Harvey Dent capturing his family. And I love Harvey Dent too. That's the other part of the story I think gets overlooked a lot. Aaron Eckhart does a great job as Harvey Dent. And I like that his character it proves the Joker right, you know? The best people can fall when given the right circumstances, or I guess the wrong circumstances. I love seeing all these characters develop. Again, Christian Bale's great as Batman, and him dealing with, struggling, what does he need to do as Batman? Should he keep being Batman and serving Gotham, or is he actually causing this chaos like Joker says? It's a great movie, great dialogue, incredible finale, one of the best movies of all time. My favorite movie from 2009 is Star Trek. This is a movie that I was so skeptical of, and I think a lot of people are just skeptical of hearing about Star Trek in general because it sounds like such nerdy, old sci-fi space bullcrap. But I felt that way before watching Star Trek, and then everything changed my mind. The casting in this movie is phenomenal. All of the characters are so lovable and charismatic. You care about each one of them so deeply. It's such a fun, fast-paced, and also emotional movie. Like a lot of entries in this video I've already talked about, it balances the humor with the emotion perfectly. The action is great. The CGI is done really, really well. There's a lot of CGI required in this movie, and yet for a 2009 movie, it looks phenomenal. The sets are great too, and I love that we get to explore Captain Kirk's, well, I don't even know if he's a captain yet in this movie. I think he becomes one, but I love seeing James Kirk's relationship unfold with Spock, and we get this whole storyline of where does emotion play into decision making versus logic. And it's a really cool dynamic that they have because Spock is the very logical, straightforward one. James is like, I'm a human, I have to base my decision on instinct. And that whole dynamic is just really cool to watch. 2010 is the year that will end this video, and will also be another year where I had to list multiple entries because this year was jam-packed with a ton of phenomenal movies, starting with Inception. Another Christopher Nolan masterpiece that made this video. I'm sorry if you're getting tired of hearing about him, but yeah, Inception is great. I love that they focus on dreams. I'm just fascinated with dreams in general, but when they introduced it and the movie starts with them in a dream, I was like, wow, that was phenomenal. A lot of great scenes, huge elaborate CGI moments that still look good. It's very deep, so well thought out. All of the characters are great. The casting is incredible, as with all Christopher Nolan movies. But at its core, if you get lost in all the confusion, I think you should focus on the fact that this movie is just about fathers trying to mend relationships with their sons and daughters. Cobb does what he does so he can reunite with his children. And that's such a sweet, emotionally gripping storyline. And the same thing goes for Cillian Murphy. I think a lot of people forget about that scene where he is in the dream with his dad holding his hand as he dies. And he's like, I'm not disappointed in you. I'm disappointed that you tried to be me. And it heals that relationship. All the climax builds up back. The dreams start going back to real life. And it's such an awesome finale. My next pick for 2010 is Toy Story. Possibly the greatest Pixar film to date. It's funny, as always. The characters are all together. All the toys are there. They're in their prime. Lotso is a great villain. I love that we get to see the toys trapped and they have to escape. I'm just kind of a sucker for breakout scenes in movies, but I love all the little intricate details they have to get right to escape. And again, as everyone has already said, what a great finale. So emotional, brought a lot of adults to tears, and focusing on the toys dealing with growing up as Andy does. Andy has to move on, and the toys do as well, and it's such an interesting plot. Perfect finale to this trilogy, because there's definitely not a fourth movie. My next pick for 2010 is a movie called It's Kind of a Funny Story. When I was a teenager, I went through a huge phase of watching a ton of drama romance movies about coming of age, a bunch of teenager sappy drama movies basically. And It's Kind of a Funny Story was the best one. I watched it a few months ago again. It still holds up. It's such a serious movie. It deals with topics like suicide and anxiety and depression and pressure on what you should do next as a teenager. It really hit home for me because I'm still in a period where I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. But it deals with these serious topics and also manages to incorporate humor really well Zach Galifianakis is in this movie, and he just does a phenomenal job. So yeah, I definitely recommend this movie. I feel like not a lot of people have seen it, but it's a great coming-of-age movie that balances humor with emotion and drama with romance. So, and it has a great ending too. It's very heartwarming. So check out that movie. My final entry for the year 2010 is one that I have watched probably 5 times, even though I watched it for the first time like a year ago. It is Kick-Ass. Aaron Taylor Johnson really carries this movie as the protagonist. He's super charismatic, relatable, and funny. You know, this movie is hilarious. It makes me laugh out loud multiple times, and I'm not an easy person to please when it comes to humor and comedy. But you know, it has the comedy, it has the drama you want, it has a lot of good action, has a good message. And you know, it's just a great flick to watch. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, truly. Like I said, I've watched it about 5 times since seeing it for the first time a year ago. But yeah, the characters are great. The villain is good. It's funny. A lot of funny action scenes. Nicolas Cage and Chloe Grace Moretz are awesome in this movie. So yeah, Kick-Ass is going to be my final entry for 2010. And that is going to conclude this video, part 1 of my favorite movies of my lifetime. I'll see you next time where I get into 2011, but until then, enjoy your day.